It was past midnight, the room quiet except for the hum of the ceiling fan. I was half asleep when I felt the mattress shift. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I realized someone had slipped under my blanket. His body was warm, his breath unsteady against my neck. In that dark room, my best friend had crossed a line neither of us could take back. And in that single night, every rule, every boundary, every secret we had was about to change forever. Nights in our small apartment always carried a certain rhythm. The hum of the ceiling fan overhead, the muffled sound of traffic in the distance, the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards whenever one of us shifted in our sleep. It was the kind of place that was far from perfect, walls too thin, furniture too old, but for two broke students trying to survive in the city, it was home. My roommate, Alex, had been my best friend since high school. We'd gone through almost everything together, late-night cramming sessions, heartbreaks, getting drunk for the first time, dreaming about the futures we didn't fully understand yet. He was the one constant in my life, the one person I knew would always be there, even when everything else felt uncertain. But there were things I never told him. Feelings I had buried deep, pretending they didn't exist. Because how could I? He was my best friend. He was the guy I laughed with, played video games with, leaned on when the world felt too heavy. He was also the guy I couldn't help but notice in quiet moments, the way his shirt clung to his shoulders after the gym, the way his smile seemed to light up an entire room, the way he carried himself with a confidence I both admired and envied. Still, I kept it locked away. It was easier to pretend. Safer. That night had started like any other. We'd been up late, sprawled out on the couch, watching some mindless show while eating leftover pizza. Alex had dozed off first, head tipped back against the armrest, his chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm. I'd nudged him awake, teasing him about snoring, and we'd stumbled into our separate rooms with lazy goodnights. I thought that was the end of it. But sometime after midnight, as I drifted in and out of half-dreams, I felt the subtle shift of weight on the mattress. At first, I thought I imagined it, maybe a dream bleeding into reality. Then came the warmth, the unmistakable pressure of another body sliding beneath my blanket. My heart slammed against my ribs. For a second, I froze, too afraid to move, too stunned to even breathe. His scent hit me next, clean soap, faint traces of cologne, something uniquely him. My mind raced, searching for an explanation. Was he sleepwalking? Was he drunk? Had he mistaken my bed for his in the dark? Alex? I whispered into the shadows. No response. But his breathing was there, uneven, heavier than usual, each exhale brushing the back of my neck. I swallowed hard, the reality sinking in. He had climbed into my bed. Voluntarily. I should have said something louder, pushed him away, demanded to know what the hell he was doing. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because beneath the shock, something else stirred in me, something dangerous, something I had buried for years. Desire. I lay there, tense, every nerve alive with awareness. His arm brushed mine under the blanket, just a faint graze, but it felt electric. His knee bumped my leg, sending sparks across my skin. I shut my eyes, pretending to still be asleep, while my entire body screamed with the weight of the moment. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. His breath evened out, steadier now, but still close enough that I felt the warmth of it against my skin. And then, as if testing a boundary, his hand shifted, resting lightly near my hip, not quite touching, but so close I could feel the heat radiating. I bit my lip, my pulse hammering in my ears. He knew. He had to know. I wanted to turn, to face him, to ask the questions burning inside me. Why are you here? What are you doing? Do you feel what I feel? But fear held me back. Fear of being wrong. Fear of ruining everything. So instead, I stayed still, pretending sleep, while inside me a war raged. Part of me wanted this moment to last forever, to never move, never speak, just live in the electricity of him lying beside me, closer than he'd ever been. Another part of me knew this was the beginning of something I couldn't take back, something that would change us no matter what happened next. Eventually, exhaustion tugged me under again, but it was a restless sleep, haunted by half-dreams of him, by the weight of his presence beside me, by the unspoken truths pressing in from every angle. When morning came, light streaming weakly through the blinds, I stirred to find the bed empty again. For a second, I thought I had imagined it all, that maybe my mind had conjured the whole thing out of loneliness and longing. But then I caught the faint indent on the other side of the mattress, the lingering scent of his cologne on the pillow. And I knew. It had happened. Alex had slipped into my bed. And whether it was an accident or something more, nothing between us would ever be the same again. The morning after felt wrong. Not because anything dramatic had happened, not because we'd crossed a visible line, but because of everything unspoken hanging in the air. When I finally pulled myself out of bed, my head was buzzing with half-formed thoughts and unanswered questions. The faint trace of warmth where Alex had lain beside me was gone, but it lingered in my mind like an echo. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining things, overanalyzing. But the evidence was there, the indent on the mattress, the scent that still clung to the sheets, the memory of his breath against my neck. As I padded into the kitchen, I found him already there. He stood by the counter, shirt rumpled, hair a mess, pouring himself a cup of coffee as if nothing had happened. For a moment, I just watched him, searching for signs, guilt, embarrassment, acknowledgement. But his face was maddeningly calm, almost too normal. "Morning," he said casually, glancing up with that lopsided smile of his. My throat went dry. "Morning." That was it. Just 2 words. No hesitation in his voice, no nervous glance, no awkward clearing of the throat. He didn't look like a guy who had slipped into his best friend's bed in the middle of the night. So maybe it really was nothing. Maybe I was reading too much into it. We moved through the motions of our morning routine. I grabbed a mug, poured coffee, sat at the tiny kitchen table while he scrolled through his phone. The silence wasn't unusual, we'd lived together long enough to be comfortable in it, but today, it felt loaded. Every clink of the spoon against his mug made my pulse jump. Every time his arm brushed the counter, I felt hyper-aware of the space he occupied. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Rough night?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He shrugged. "Kinda. Couldn't sleep. Ended up tossing around a lot." My heart skipped. Tossing around, in my bed? But I said nothing. Just nodded and forced a sip of too hot coffee down my throat, burning my tongue in the process. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. The day went on like that, normal, routine, maddeningly ordinary. Classes, errands, the same inside jokes we always shared. On the surface, nothing had changed. But beneath it, I felt like I was walking a tightrope, waiting for him to slip, to give me something, anything, that proved last night wasn't just a figment of my desperate imagination. That evening, as we sat on the couch playing video games, I caught him glancing at me more than once. Not long stares, nothing obvious. Just flickers. His eyes on me for half a second too long before darting back to the screen. Each one set my nerves on fire. And then, when we both reached for the same controller at the same time, his hand brushed mine. It should have been nothing, we'd bumped into each other a million times before. But this time, he didn't pull away immediately. His fingers lingered, just for a second, curling slightly like they didn't want to let go. I swallowed hard. Neither of us said anything. Later, when he headed to his room, I found myself listening, straining for the sound of his footsteps stopping outside my door. My chest tightened with every creak of the floorboards. But his door closed, and the apartment went still. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Was he testing me? Was this some game? Or had it all been unintentional, a drunken mistake, a sleepwalking accident, something I'd blown out of proportion because of my own hidden feelings? Days passed, each one blurring into the next. Nothing was said, but the tension between us grew sharper. I started noticing things I hadn't before, or maybe I'd noticed them all along, but now they meant something different. The way his eyes softened when he laughed. The way he'd lean close when he was trying to explain something. The way he'd stretch his arms, shirt riding up to expose a sliver of skin, and my gaze would betray me before I could look away. It was torture. But then came the second night. I had fallen asleep late, headphones in, scrolling through random videos on my phone until exhaustion finally claimed me. And just like before, I woke in the middle of the night to the dip of the mattress. My breath caught. It was him. Again. The air shifted with his presence, the warmth of his body radiating through the blanket. He didn't say anything. He didn't explain. He just lay there, closer than before, his arm brushing mine in the dark. I didn't move. My pulse thundered in my ears, my thoughts spinning. This wasn't an accident. It couldn't be. Twice was too much to chalk up to chance. This time, I dared to whisper, "Alex?" Silence. But the silence was answer enough. He was awake. I could feel it in the way his breathing wasn't steady, in the faint tension humming off him like static. Neither of us spoke, yet the room was alive with everything we weren't saying. The second night confirmed what the first had only suggested, something was happening. Something neither of us understood yet, but both of us felt. And I knew, deep down, that whatever this was, it was only the beginning. The second night changed everything. Not because something dramatic happened, we didn't kiss, we didn't confess, but because of what didn't happen. He didn't leave. He didn't explain. He just stayed there beside me, awake in the dark, his silence speaking louder than words ever could. When I woke the next morning, sunlight streaming through the blinds, his side of the bed was empty again. But this time, I didn't question whether it had been real. I knew it was. And I knew I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't happening. All day, I was a mess of nerves. My chest tightened whenever he walked into the room. My thoughts twisted around every glance, every brush of his hand, every casual touch that suddenly felt charged with meaning. I caught myself staring at him when I thought he wasn't looking, and when his eyes met mine unexpectedly, I had to look away before the truth slipped out. But Alex? He carried on like nothing had changed. It drove me crazy. That evening, I found myself blurting it out while we were both sitting on the couch, a random show playing on the TV. "Why did you come into my room?" He froze, his hand halfway to the bowl of popcorn between us. For a second, he looked like a deer caught in headlights, wide eyes, lips parting, breath stalling. Then he shrugged, too casually. "I couldn't sleep." "That's not an answer." My voice shook, but I pressed on. "You didn't just walk past your bed and end up in mine by mistake. You chose to." His jaw clenched. His eyes flickered away. For once, his easy charm, his practiced calm, deserted him. I don't know," he muttered finally. "But I didn't buy it." "You do know," I said quietly. "You just don't want to say it." The silence stretched between us, taut and electric. My heart pounded so loud I thought he could hear it. Finally, he stood, grabbing the empty soda can from the coffee table as if the conversation could be brushed away as easily. "Forget it," he muttered. "It was nothing. Just, forget it." But I couldn't forget it. That night, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I waited. Every creak of the building made me tense, every sound from the hallway made my pulse race. Would he come again? Would he test the boundary a third time? Minutes dragged into hours. Midnight passed. Then one. Then two. Nothing. When dawn finally bled through the blinds, I realized he hadn't come. And a strange mix of disappointment and relief twisted in my chest. For the next couple of days, everything was off. He was quieter than usual. Less playful. Our conversations were shorter, our laughter rarer. It was like there was a wall between us now, one we'd both built but neither of us knew how to tear down. One night, I found him sitting on the balcony, hood pulled up against the chill, cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. He wasn't much of a smoker, only when he was stressed. I slid the door open and stepped outside. "Thought you quit." He exhaled a thin stream of smoke, eyes fixed on the city lights. "Guess I'm bad at keeping promises." The words stung more than they should have. We sat in silence for a while, the distant hum of traffic filling the space between us. Finally, I asked, "Is this about the other night?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, rough. "You're my best friend. That's not supposed to happen." The confession sat heavy in the air. I swallowed hard. But it did. He turned then, meeting my gaze. In his eyes, I saw a storm, fear, longing, guilt, desire, all clashing and colliding. For a second, I thought he was going to say something more. Maybe even close the distance between us. But he didn't. He just stubbed out the cigarette and muttered, "Good night," before disappearing back inside. I stood there alone, the night air cold against my skin, and realized something terrifying. Whatever this was, it wasn't going away. The third night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was waiting for him, but because the questions in my head wouldn't stop. Did he want me the way I wanted him? Or was this just a mistake he regretted? Would saying the wrong thing ruin everything we had, or was staying silent only making it worse? Around 3 in the morning, I heard it, the soft creak of the floorboards. My heart leapt. This time, I didn't close my eyes and pretend to be asleep. I didn't hold my breath and wait. I turned my head just enough to see him standing there in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds. His shoulders were tense, his hands balled into fists at his sides. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at me, like he was fighting some invisible battle. Finally, he moved. Slowly, carefully, he crossed the room and slipped into the bed again. But this time, he didn't stay on his side. He pressed closer, his forehead nearly touching my shoulder, his breathing uneven. And this time, I whispered, "Alex, what are we doing?" His answer was so soft I almost missed it. "I don't know. But I can't stay away." The words sent a shiver through me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us said another word. But in that moment, I knew, whatever line we'd been dancing around, we'd already crossed it. The third night blurred the line between friendship and something else entirely. Alex's whisper, "I can't stay away," looped in my head long after he drifted into a restless sleep beside me. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling his warmth seep into my skin like an invisible brand. For the first time, I stopped trying to convince myself it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. The problem was, neither of us knew what to do with it. When morning came, he was gone again, his side of the bed empty before sunlight had even touched the room. At breakfast, he didn't look at me, didn't joke, didn't even comment on my messy hair the way he usually did. It was like the night before hadn't happened at all. But I couldn't play along this time. Alex, I said finally, setting my coffee mug down harder than I intended. We need to talk. His eyes flicked up, guarded. About what? You know what. He sighed, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest like a shield. No, I don't. So enlighten me. Don't do that, I snapped. Don't act like you didn't slip into my bed 3 nights in a row. Don't act like you didn't say you couldn't stay away. Silence. His jaw worked, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't respond. Alex, I pressed, softer now. What are we doing? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. Okay? I don't know what the hell I'm doing. When I'm near you, I feel different. And when I'm not, I feel like something's missing. But this, he gestured between us. This isn't supposed to happen. My chest tightened. Why not? Because you're my best friend, he said, voice cracking. Because if this goes wrong, we lose everything. And because, he trailed off, shaking his head. Because what? His eyes finally met mine, raw and unguarded. Because I don't know how to stop wanting you. The words slammed into me like a tidal wave. For a heartbeat, the room felt too small, the air too thick. I wanted to reach across the table, to close the distance between us, to tell him I felt the same. But fear rooted me in place. Fear of ruining everything. Fear of losing him if we dared to name what was happening. So I said nothing. And in that silence, something broke. He pushed his chair back and stood abruptly. I can't do this right now. Then he was gone, the front door slamming shut behind him. The days that followed were unbearable. He avoided me. Stayed out late. Slept in his own room. When we did cross paths, he kept things clipped, surface level. It was like we were strangers living under the same roof. But the more he pulled away, the more I realized how deep I was in. Every glance, every laugh we used to share, it wasn't just friendship for me anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. And now that the truth was out, I couldn't stuff it back into the box we'd both tried so hard to keep it in. One night, after hours of tossing in bed, I heard the front door open. Footsteps shuffled down the hallway. I held my breath, half hoping, half dreading he'd come to my room again. But his door closed, and I was left in the silence. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on his door. Come in, he muttered, voice muffled. When I stepped inside, the room was dim, curtains drawn. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. You've been avoiding me, I said quietly. He didn't look up. Because I don't trust myself. My heart pounded. Alex. No, he cut in sharply. You don't get it. I've spent years pretending I'm fine, that I don't feel this way. But I do. And being near you just makes it harder to keep it buried. I froze. You felt this way for years? Finally, he looked at me, eyes burning with frustration and longing. Yes. And I didn't say anything because I was terrified of losing you. You're the most important person in my life. And if I screw this up, if I cross the line and you don't feel the same, his voice cracked. I'd rather keep it locked inside than risk losing you completely. I stepped closer, my chest aching. But what if I do feel the same? His breath caught. The silence that followed was suffocating. He searched my face, eyes darting as if trying to read every flicker of emotion. Do you? He whispered. I swallowed hard, the words trembling on my lips. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Yes, I said finally, voice barely audible. I do. For a second, the world seemed to stop. Then he stood, closing the distance between us in 2 quick steps. His hand lifted, hesitant, hovering near my face as if asking permission. My breath hitched, and I leaned into his touch. The spark that shot through me at that simple contact was undeniable. But just as quickly, he pulled back, shaking his head. I can't. Not like this. Frustration surged in me. Why not? Because I don't want the first time to be some messy mistake we regret, he said, voice raw. I want it to mean something. And right now, all I feel is like I'm drowning in what-ifs. He turned away, running both hands through his hair like he was coming apart. I wanted to argue, to grab his arm and make him see, but I didn't. Because deep down, I understood. This wasn't just about desire. It was about everything we stood to lose, and everything we stood to gain. Still, the ache in my chest didn't fade. That night, lying awake in my bed, I realized the real conflict wasn't between me and Alex. It was inside us, between fear and longing, between the safety of friendship and the risk of love. And for the first time, I didn't know which side would win. The air between us shifted after that conversation. Not clearer, not easier, just heavier. We both knew the truth now. The words had been said. There was no taking them back. But instead of setting us free, the confessions chained us in a limbo neither of us knew how to escape. For days, we circled each other like ghosts. At breakfast, our eyes lingered too long but our words stayed short. At night, I listened for the sound of his footsteps outside my door, torn between wanting him to come in and fearing what might happen if he did. The tension gnawed at me, until one evening when he suggested we meet up with some friends at a local bar. "Maybe it'll help clear our heads," he said casually, though the strain in his smile betrayed him. I agreed, partly because I was desperate for any kind of distraction. The bar was crowded, music thrumming through the floorboards, the smell of beer and sweat thick in the air. For a while, it worked. We laughed with friends, played a few rounds of pool, shouted over the music. It almost felt normal again, until I noticed the way other guys looked at him. One in particular. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a cocky grin. He leaned in too close when he talked to Alex, hand brushing his arm casually, confidently. And Alex didn't pull away. Jealousy struck hot in my chest, sharp and ugly. My drink soured on my tongue as I watched them, my hands curling into fists at my sides. Finally, when the guy laughed at something Alex said and rested a hand on his shoulder, I couldn't take it anymore. I crossed the room and said, maybe louder than I should have, "Hey, Alex, can we talk for a second?" He looked startled, but nodded, excusing himself from the guy with an awkward smile. I led him outside into the cool night air. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. "What was what?" His brows knit in confusion. "You letting him paw all over you like that?" His eyes narrowed. "So now you get to decide who talks to me?" "That's not what I'm saying." My voice dropped, raw with emotion. "But you know how I feel about you, and you, God, Alex, you can't just let someone else." He cut me off, stepping closer. "You don't get to play jealous boyfriend when you won't even admit what we are." The words sliced deep. I froze, stunned. He took a shaky breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not trying to make you jealous. But do you realize how confusing this is for me? One minute you say you feel the same, the next you're acting like we should just forget it. I can't keep living in the in-between." I swallowed hard, guilt and frustration tangling inside me. "I'm scared, Alex. Okay? I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of screwing this up. But seeing you with him," I broke off, shaking my head. "It felt like losing you anyway." His expression softened, the anger in his eyes giving way to something more vulnerable. "Then stop running from it." The words hung between us, electric. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me right there on the sidewalk, under the glow of the neon bar sign. His hand twitched, like he wanted to reach for me. My chest ached with wanting to close the gap. But then a group of people stumbled out of the bar, laughing loudly, and the moment shattered. Alex pulled back, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Let's just go home," he muttered. The ride back was silent, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Back at the apartment, the tension finally boiled over. We walked inside, and before I could even set my keys down, Alex turned on me. "I can't keep doing this." My heart thudded. Doing what? This push and pull. This limbo. Either we're just friends, or we're something more. But I can't be both, and I can't keep pretending nothing's happening when it clearly is. His voice cracked on the last word, and the sight of him, eyes bright with unshed emotion, shoulders tense with frustration, broke something open inside me. "You're right," I whispered. He blinked, thrown off. "You're right," I repeated, stronger this time. "I don't want just friendship anymore. I don't want to keep pretending. I want you." His breath hitched. "Say it again." "I want you." The silence that followed was deafening. His eyes searched mine, desperate, disbelieving, hungry. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the heat of him, close enough that his breath brushed my lips. But once again, he stopped short, trembling. "If we do this, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," I said, my voice shaking but certain. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world was holding its breath. And then, he pulled away. His hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. "I need time," he whispered. "Just time." He turned and walked toward his room, leaving me standing there in the dim glow of the living room lamp, heart-shattering and soaring all at once. Because even though he hadn't kissed me, even though we were still tangled in fear and hesitation, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't going away. And sooner or later, one of us was going to break. Time. That's what Alex had asked for. And for the next week, I gave it to him, because what else could I do? But time didn't feel like healing. It felt like distance. Like something fragile between us was fraying, thread by thread. He stopped lingering in my doorway at night. Stopped sitting too close on the couch when we watched movies. Even his laughter sounded different, lighter when it was with other people, guarded when it was with me. And every night, when I lay in bed alone, I thought about the words we'd finally said to each other. "I want you." Words that should have pulled us closer. But instead, it was as if he'd built a wall higher than before. The silence was unbearable. One evening, I came home late from class, expecting to find him in the kitchen making one of his ridiculous midnight sandwiches. Instead, I found him on the couch with someone else. A guy I didn't know. They were sitting close, too close. Alex laughed at something the guy whispered, leaning his head back against the cushion, his smile so easy it made my stomach twist. They didn't notice me at first. I stood frozen in the doorway, my chest tightening, until Alex finally turned his head. His smile faltered. "Oh. You're home," he said, voice neutral, as if nothing was wrong. "Yeah, I managed," my throat dry. "Didn't realize we had company." "This is Mark," Alex introduced, gesturing casually. "He's in my econ class." Mark gave me a polite nod, oblivious to the storm brewing behind my eyes. I mumbled some excuse about needing to shower and retreated to my room, shutting the door harder than I meant to. Under the roar of the water, I pressed my hands to my face and tried to breathe. But all I could see was Alex's smile, the one that had once been mine, now given so freely to someone else. When I came out later, the apartment was quiet. Mark was gone. Alex's door was closed. The next day, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, cornering him in the kitchen. He blinked at me, startled. "Doing what?" "Pretending like nothing's going on. Bringing some guy over. Acting like we didn't just," my voice cracked. "Like we didn't just admit everything." He set down the glass he was holding, the tension in his shoulders visible. "I told you I needed time." "Time for what? To figure out if you even want this? To see if there's someone better?" His jaw tightened. "Don't twist this." "I'm not twisting anything. I'm just," my voice broke again, anger and fear tangling in my chest. "I can't stand watching you with someone else, Alex. It's killing me." He stared at me, his face unreadable. Then, softly, he said, "And do you think it doesn't kill me to want you and not know if you're strong enough to handle it?" The words hit me like a slap. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, voice sharp. "It means," he said, stepping closer, "that you've been scared since the beginning. Scared of what people will say. Scared of what it means. Scared of me. And I can't throw myself into this if you're still halfway out the door." I swallowed hard, because he wasn't wrong. Every hesitation, every pause, every excuse, it had all come from me. From my fear. "I'm trying," I whispered. "Then prove it." The challenge in his eyes burned through me. I wanted to answer. I wanted to show him right there in the kitchen that my fear didn't outweigh what I felt for him. But the words caught in my throat, stuck behind years of silence and self-doubt. And he saw it. He saw the hesitation. Something shuddered in his gaze. "Forget it," he muttered, turning away. I shouldn't have said anything. He grabbed his bag and left before I could find the courage to stop him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it over and over, the sharp edge in his voice, the hurt in his eyes, the way he'd walked out without looking back. I knew I'd pushed him too far. But for the first time, I also knew something else. If I didn't do something, something real, I was going to lose him. So I did the one thing I'd always been too scared to do. The next evening, when Alex came home from class, he found me sitting on the couch, waiting. "We need to talk," I said, standing as he dropped his bag by the door. He sighed, exhausted. "Not tonight. Please." "No," my voice shook, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. "Tonight." He froze, surprised at my tone. I took a step closer, my chest tight. "You're right. I've been scared. I've been hiding behind excuses because I thought admitting this would ruin everything. But the truth is, it already is. Pretending we can go back to being just friends is destroying us." His breath hitched, but he didn't move. I pressed on. "You asked me to prove it. So here it is." My hands trembled as I reached for him, fingers brushing against his. "I'm done hiding. I want you. Not maybe. Not someday. Now." For a long, agonizing moment, he just stared at me. His eyes searched mine like he was trying to see if I meant it, if this was real. Then, slowly, his fingers curled around mine. "You don't get to take it back," he whispered. "I don't want to." The silence stretched, heavy with all the words we hadn't said, all the fear we'd carried. And then, finally, he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could hardly breathe. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was a promise. A promise that the wall between us was cracking. And when it finally broke, nothing would be the same. The storm outside that night was relentless. Rain battered against the windows, the kind of steady pounding that made the whole apartment feel smaller, more intimate. The power flickered twice, plunging the living room into momentary darkness before humming back to life. Alex and I hadn't moved from the couch. My words were still hanging in the air between us. "I want you. Now." His arms were wrapped around me, his body pressed solid and unshakable against mine. But we weren't speaking. It was as if any word might shatter the fragile truce we'd just found. I could feel his heartbeat, fast and uneven, thudding against my chest. Every second that passed made me more aware of how close we were, his breath warm against my temple, his hand still gripping the back of my shirt like he was afraid I'd slip away. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Do you mean it?" I pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes, wide, uncertain, burning, searched mine like he was still waiting for me to hesitate, to run. "I've never meant anything more," I whispered. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Heavy, yes, but charged. The kind of silence that hummed with possibility. And then, slowly, carefully, Alex leaned in. For a heartbeat, I froze. My mind screamed with every what if this ruined us? What if it wasn't the same after? What if I wasn't enough? But then his lips brushed mine, tentative, questioning, and all those thoughts burned away. It wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't perfect. His mouth was hesitant, mine too eager, both of us trembling with nerves we couldn't quite hide. But it was real. God, it was real. The taste of him. The warmth. The way his hand slid up, tentative but desperate, into my hair as if anchoring himself. I didn't even realize I'd made a sound until he deepened the kiss, pulling me closer, swallowing the breathless gasp that escaped my throat. For weeks, months, years, we had circled this. Teased the edge of it. And now there was no pulling back. When he finally broke away, his forehead pressed against mine, his chest rising and falling fast, he whispered, "You have no idea how long I've wanted this." "I think I do," I said, my voice unsteady. "Because it's the same for me." His laugh was soft, disbelieving. But there was no mistaking the relief in it, the way his shoulders eased for the first time in what felt like forever. We didn't go to our separate rooms that night. When the storm finally knocked the power out completely, plunging the apartment into darkness, we stayed where we were. The couch was too small, too uncomfortable, but neither of us cared. I lay with my head on his chest, his arm wrapped around me, and for the first time, it didn't feel like pretending. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like finally. Still, the fear lingered at the edges of my thoughts. The world outside this apartment wouldn't understand. Friends might not understand. Family definitely wouldn't. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Sometime past midnight, I stirred. The storm had quieted to a steady drizzle. The only sound was Alex's breathing, deep and even beneath me. I should have gone back to sleep. But instead, I lifted my head, studying him in the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds. His face looked softer in sleep, younger. Vulnerable. And I realized, this wasn't just about attraction. Wasn't just about desire. I loved him. The thought was terrifying. But it was also freeing. Because suddenly, I knew, I didn't care how complicated it was. I didn't care how scary. I wasn't going to let him go. At some point, he stirred too. His eyes blinked open, still heavy with sleep, and he gave me a lazy smile. "Still here," he murmured. "Yeah," I whispered back. He shifted, pulling me even closer. "Good." The word was so simple, but the weight of it wrapped around me like another blanket. And in that dark, quiet room, with rain dripping from the eaves outside, the line between fear and certainty blurred. This was it. We weren't just friends anymore. We weren't pretending. We were us. And everything was about to change. But as dawn crept into the room, painting the walls with pale light, reality pressed in again. Alex stirred before I did, brushing a hand through his messy hair. We probably need to talk." The words made my stomach twist. "Talk?" I echoed, trying to keep my voice steady. He gave me a look equal parts nervous and determined. "About what this means. About what happens now." I nodded, swallowing hard. Because he was right. We couldn't just exist in the bubble of last night forever. But as I looked at him, his hair tangled from sleep, his eyes still soft with unspoken affection, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, I wanted it with him. That morning, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee between us, the storm outside finally broken. No more silence. No more hiding. It was time to face what we'd started. The kitchen was still, filled only with the faint hiss of rain easing off outside and the occasional clink of Alex's spoon against his mug. We sat across from each other, the table between us cluttered with textbooks, unopened mail, and the silence of two people who had crossed a line but hadn't yet decided what it meant. I stared into my coffee, heart thudding. Last night felt fragile in the morning light, like something I wasn't sure I was allowed to keep. Alex finally broke the silence. "So, are we going to talk about it?" I looked up. His hair was still messy, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but there was a steadiness in him I hadn't noticed before. "Talk about what?" I asked, stalling. He gave me a look that cut through the weak joke. "Don't do that. Not after what happened." I set my mug down with a shaky breath. Fine. You're right. We should talk. The words hung there, daring either of us to make the first move. Alex leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Do you regret it? The question hit me like a punch. No, I said quickly, maybe too quickly. God, no. I've wanted that for longer than I can admit. Relief softened his face, but only for a second. Then his jaw tightened again. Then what are we? Because I can't do this if it's just some in-between thing for you. I can't be your secret experiment. The words stung, because they weren't unfair. I don't want that, I said, my voice breaking. I don't want you to be some mistake I don't talk about. I hesitated, forcing myself to say the truth. I'm scared, Alex. Of everything. Of what people will say. Of how much this changes. Of losing you if it goes wrong. He leaned back, folding his arms. Newsflash, you're already losing me if you keep pretending you don't know what you want. The sharpness in his voice made my chest ache, but it was honest. Brutally, painfully honest. The silence stretched again until I couldn't take it. Last night, I started. He cut in, his tone softer this time. Last night was everything I've wanted for years. But I need to know it wasn't just the storm, or the wine, or the heat of the moment. I need to know you want me in the daylight too. I swallowed hard. I do. Then prove it. The challenge was the same as before. But this time, it wasn't about kissing him in the kitchen or whispering promises in the dark. It was about something bigger. I pushed back my chair and stood, my legs shaky. What are you doing? He asked, wary. I walked around the table until I was standing in front of him. My hands trembled as I reached for his, threading my fingers through his despite the fear clawing at me. I'm proving it, I said. My voice wasn't steady, but it was enough. He searched my face, his eyes wide, like he didn't quite believe it. But when I bent down and kissed him, soft, certain, right there in the bright, ordinary morning light, he let out a sound that broke something open in both of us. Because this wasn't hidden. This wasn't safe in the dark. This was real. When I pulled back, my breath shaky, I whispered, I don't care anymore. Who knows, who doesn't? I don't care. I just want you. For a moment, his expression cracked into something raw, something like relief and disbelief all tangled together. He stood, pulling me against him, his arms wrapping around me tight. Don't say that unless you mean it, he said into my hair. I mean it, I whispered. I swear. The rest of the day felt like walking on unsteady legs. We stayed close, almost unconsciously. His hand brushed mine when we made lunch. He leaned against my shoulder when we watched TV. Every little touch felt like a declaration, this is different now. But there was also a weight, an awareness that the world outside our apartment hadn't changed. At one point, I caught him staring at me, his brow furrowed. What? I asked, nervous. He hesitated. Do you think we're ready for people to know? The question made my stomach twist. Because as much as I wanted to say yes, the fear wasn't gone. Not completely. Maybe not today, I admitted. But soon. I want to get there. With you. He studied me for a long time, then finally nodded. That's enough. For now. That night, we didn't pretend to sleep in separate rooms. I remember standing in the doorway of his room, watching as he set his book down and looked up at me. Neither of us said a word. I just crossed the space and climbed into his bed, and he shifted over like it was the most natural thing in the world. We lay there in the quiet, the storm outside finally gone, the air heavy with the kind of peace that comes after a long fight. His arm slid around my waist. My fingers tangled with his. I'm not letting you go, I whispered into the dark. You better not, he murmured back, his lips brushing my temple. And for the first time, I believed it. The climax wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a grand gesture or some cinematic confession. It was smaller, simpler. Two boys in a quiet apartment, finally admitting what they'd both known all along. That the night he slipped into my bed wasn't an accident. It was the beginning. Weeks later, I found myself walking home with Alex on a cool autumn evening. The leaves crunched beneath our shoes, and for once, I wasn't worrying about who might see us walking this close, shoulders brushing. We weren't shouting it from rooftops yet, but we weren't hiding either. And that small shift, that quiet confidence, felt like the bravest thing I'd ever done. Sometimes I caught myself remembering the night it all began, the storm, the dark room, the way his weight dipped the mattress beside me. Back then, it had felt like a mistake waiting to happen, a boundary waiting to be broken. Now, I realized it was something else entirely. It was the moment I stopped running from myself. And from him. Because love wasn't meant to be safe. It wasn't meant to be hidden in the shadows of what-ifs and maybes. It was meant to be messy and terrifying and beautiful. I glanced over at him, catching the soft smile on his lips as he shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. When his fingers brushed mine, I didn't pull away. I laced them together, right there in the open, as if the world had always known what I'd been too afraid to admit. He looked at me then, like I was his whole world. And in that moment, I knew, the night he slipped into my bed didn't just change everything. It gave me everything. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real, raw, and emotional gay love stories. Your support helps us bring hidden romances into the light.